Okay, so let's get practical and talk about how you're going to select your niche and make sure that it's profitable and that you can create a great business for it. Now, before I dive into how to pick your niche, I want to discuss kind of high level the difference between a business niche and a skill niche, because a lot of people, when I talk to them about niching down, they're starting to talk about their skill as if it's a niche. Like, oh, I'm a Webflow designer, so my niche is Webflow. Or I'm doing specific branding, so my niche is branding. And I want to say some people do that. Some people focus on their skill, and sometimes that works. If your skill is very unique, for example, you do hand lettering logos, and not a lot of people do that, you can kind of build a position for yourself as the hand lettering guy. And if that skill is in demand, as if people are actually searching for that, it might work for you. However, I do not recommend this, because when it comes down to your marketing, it's still going to be very hard to explain how you use that skill to help a specific business. And businesses always, again, look to solve their own problems. And so even if you're, let's say, a Webflow designer, saying that you're a Webflow designer doesn't mean that you help startups better than you help restaurants, for example. And so I would still much recommend that you focus on a business niche and not just choose to focus on your skill, because you're going to lose that whole marketing aspect and that advantage that you have when you're picking a business niche. So that's my input, and I suggest we start thinking about the types of businesses that we want to work with. So the first thing would be, and you're going to do this at the end of this week, is you're going to list a lot of ideas for the niche, and then you're going to ask yourself some questions to understand whether they are the right niche for you. And the first question that we're going to ask ourselves is, do they actually have the money? Because we're interested in creating a profitable business here, and we want to work with clients that have the money to pay high prices for our work, right? We want to solve big problems, and for those big problems, we want to be compensated with a lot of money. So the first question is, do they have the money? A lot of people complain that their clients are cheap and that their clients are not willing to pay a lot, and that's just because their clients don't actually have the money. So you can't complain about somebody not willing to spend the money if they don't have the money. So how do you know if clients have the money or not? So the first one is, you want to understand if they actually have a lot of money. The question is, are they making at the moment a lot of money? And you can tell that using multiple methods to understand how much money they're making or how much money they're raised. The reason that I'm saying money raised is because startups, a lot of time tech startups, are not making a lot of money, but they raise millions of dollars from investors, and then they deploy that money to build their own brand and product, and they're not looking to make money for a few years. And you can still charge a lot of money because, again, they have millions of dollars in the bank. Other businesses are already making a lot of money, and you want to make sure that they are making a lot of money. And when I say a lot of money, I mean in the millions, right? If they're not making millions of dollars, they probably don't have a big budget for their marketing or for their brand. So how do we know? Again, we can look at something like the news or something like that to see if they talk about how much money they're making or how much stuff they're selling. But a very easy way to look at it is to see how many employees does a company has. And that's very easy to see. You can see usually on LinkedIn or on some directories, you can see how many employees a company has. Sometimes you can even go to the company's website and go to their about page and see how many employees they have. And the usual calculation that you do is you multiply, usually I think between $100,000 and $200,000 per employee. So that's usually, so if a company has 10 employees, it's safe to assume that they're making over $1 million a year. Okay, and you want to make sure that the company that you work with have at least something like that, right? At least $1 million per year. Again, some people, like real estate agents or dentists, maybe they have a smaller practice, but they still have big budget. They're still making multiple six-figure per year, and so they can still afford to pay for a high-value designer, because when they are making a lot of money, they can the value that you're going to bring to them with a new website or with a new brand or with a new project is going to be valued in a lot of money, right? So you want to make sure that you're making a big impact for them. The way that you do this is you also look at how much are they selling, right? So if you're working with a dentist that every surgery or something like that costs $10,000, and you can assume that he's doing a few of them, per month, then he's making multiple six figures, if not millions of dollars. And then you understand that if you help him by, improving his brand or his website, close at least 3 to 5 more clients per year, you can see that you have increased his business value in tens of thousands of dollars. And so it's easy investment to spend a few $1,000s on a project like that. So if they're not selling high ticket items, maybe they're selling a lot. So a lot of e-commerce clients, maybe they're just selling tons of t-shirt, for example. So you need to look at the price of what they're selling or the volumes of what they're selling to try to understand how much money they're doing. Now, one other thing is that you need to understand some people might have the money, but they're not going to be willing to spend it on design, for example. Maybe they don't value this. So you want to make sure that within the niche that you're working with, the niche and the industry actually values what you are selling. Okay, and the best way to predict future behavior is to look at past behavior. So I would ask myself when doing the research, are they currently paying for what I'm selling? And it doesn't have to be that specific company. I'm looking at right now on a niche level. So if I'm selling web design and I look at a niche and the whole niche has really crappy website, even though they're making a lot of money, for me that would be a red flag. That would be like, if they have a lot of money but they all have crappy website, meaning that they don't want to invest in good website. However, sometimes you would see a niche that's maybe not having that much money, but they all have amazing websites because they're in competition, and having great design is really what helps them to differentiate themselves. Then yes, they are currently paying for what I'm selling. Now, the way that you do this, again, is part of your research. You look at their branding, you go through their website, and you see who did them. A lot of times I would do a research such as, if I'm looking at a company, then I would look at, I would Google something like a company name, design websites, and I would go to Google Images and I would try to find the designer or the agency that did their website and put that work in their portfolio, because I want to assess how much money they're charging or how much they probably paid for that website. So that's kind of the research that you're going to go through to understand what they're selling. I want to take a minute to jump to Awards website. You're probably familiar with this. This is great websites, award-winning websites. And I a lot of time use this website as a research tool, because you can go here so I'm in the winner websites, and I can actually get here categories of websites. Now, what that means to me is, if I go for real estate, for example, and I see all these amazing real estate projects, I know that most of the websites here in Awards are at least 4 or 5 figure websites. So if I'm seeing a category right here on Awards, I already know that these are people who are paying for high value websites. Now, another thing that you can see here, I think if you go to directory, there's a professional directory, and you can go here into, I think, quotes. Okay, so notice here, this is a lot of web design agencies, and you can see here from the quotes that these are the prices of the website. So most prices, 1,000 websites here, were priced between $5,000 to $30,000. 360 websites costed over $30,000, and only 152 websites costed under $5,000. So you can safely assume that most of the website that you saw here in the categories that I showed before costed something between $5,000 and $30,000. So this is a great validation for me that these niches that you can see right here actually pay high prices for web design. So that's a tool that I use to kind of validate whether my niche has money. Okay, the next question you should ask yourself is the market actually big enough? Can I find enough clients here so I can build a sustainable long-term business within that niche? And so the first thing that I do is I check out how many companies actually exist within that niche. A lot of times you can do that pretty easily if you go and find directories for that specific industry. So again, I personally work within the startup ecosystem, and so directories for my industry would be something like Crunchbase or AngelList, which are websites that are actually directories of all the companies within my niche, and you can see there if there's hundreds or thousands of companies. And between hundreds and thousands of companies means that it's a valid niche, right? There's enough business here that even if I get 10 clients, 20 clients per year, I can still operate, and that niche is big enough. If there's only 50 companies in the world within that niche, it might not be big enough. It might not be able, I won't be able to close 10 of them every year or something like that. And that means that it's probably a niche that is a little bit too small. Now, as I've said in the beginning, you can determine how small you want to be within that niche. So you can be startups, which is there's hundreds of thousands of startups in the world. You can go down to, let's say, B2B startups, and then you can be even smaller, like healthcare startups in New York City. And that kind of focuses your efforts. Now, again, this is a trade-off. The more focused you are, the better your marketing will be, the better your expertise and so forth. But if you go down too small, where there's only like 50 companies like this or less, then probably this is not going to be sustainable. So you want to be somewhere between the hundreds to thousands of companies in the niche that you select. Now, you want to make sure that you have access to them, at least in a list format, and that you can find their emails, or you can start understanding where they're hanging out. They do have like media outlets. Do they have their own events and stuff like that? You want to be able to find them, because what you'll do is you'll start building relationships with them, and you want to associate yourself with them. And if you don't know where they are or where they hang out, or how to reach out to them, that's going to make your life hard. So you want to make sure that you can somewhat easily find them. Again, Google is your best friend. If I would go into a niche, let's say, again, real estate, I would look for, real estate directories or best real estate blogs, best real estate events, and try to figure out where do they congregate. Now, one thing that you should be looking at is where we are today, and do we expect this market to grow or not to grow? As I'm recording this is 2020. We're in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. And so if I would be looking into the restaurant industry, that's an industry that's currently struggling. I'm not saying never go into the restaurants, but right now is a difficult time for them. So looking forward into the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years, that market is going to be struggling versus other markets, for example, learning online or something like that. That market is probably going to grow within the next few years. So you want to make a pick right now that is probably going to grow, a market that's going to grow, and then you can grow with it. So that's one of the concerns that you want to consider at this point. Now, an important question is, do you have leverage within that niche when you're picking it? So this is something that you want to think about. You don't always have that. And when I say leverage, I basically mean, do you have some kind of a competitive advantage that you can deploy? If you're going to focus on that, if you're going to focus on tech startups and I'm going to focus on tech startups, who's going to win between me and you? Do you have some kind of a reason why you are going to win and I'm not going to win? A lot of times that leverage can be connections. So this will go down to sales, and we'll talk a lot about sales, but people hire a lot of people that they know and trust. So if you already have some kind of connections within a niche, that immediately gives you a competitive advantage, because you know somebody, you can talk to them, you can ask for intros, they trust you, they can help you out within that niche. And a lot of people never took the time to actually think about who they know from their family, from their friends, from the people they went to school with, who they are right now, where do they work right now, is what they're doing is an interesting niche to me. And so when you take a time to look at the possible niches for you, try to think about, do I have connections within that niche? Is there anybody that I can talk to? Because once you have that, that gives you leverage within that niche. Another thing that can give you leverage is experience. So that experience can be professional, but it can also be personal. So for example, if I would go into the music industry as a niche, if I want to work with record labels, and I had a band when I was back in high school and re-recorded an album, I went through that and I understand them. I have the experience of working with a record label, and not as a designer but as a musician. And so I have experience within that niche. I understand how they speak. I understand where they go. I understand their problems. And so having that experience can give you a big leverage. So think about the experience that you have personally and professionally that can give you leverage within that niche. And another leverage can be a skill that's very much in demand within that niche. So an example for me is, I've mentioned this and I'll probably mention this a lot by the end of this course, I work with tech startups, and usually how I help them is I help them both with brand and product design and marketing. So I have 3 skills when I work with them, which is both marketing, brand, and product design, UX and UI design. And that is something that is in demand because small startups can't hire 3 different people to get the job done. However, most of the people on the market are usually just that startups hire are usually just what's called product designers or UX UI designers, and they're lacking the marketing skills. And so the fact that I came just because I worked in ad agencies and branding agency before, and I had an extra skill that was in demand, but a lot of other people didn't have that, gave me leverage within that specific niche. And again, this is a particular case and a problem of that niche that is not relevant in all niches, but it was relevant in that specific niche. Now, the last question that you want to ask yourself is, how personally interested are you in that niche? Because to succeed in that niche, you're going to have to be very passionate to learn everything about this and read a lot about this, learn about their life. You want to hang out and spend time with these people, because a lot of it is going to be building relationship with these people. Now, if this is something that you really don't like and you won't enjoy working with these people and you won't enjoy reading about them and you won't enjoy spending time with them, it might be kind of a red flag that this niche is not a good idea for you. But if you are passionate about this, then you should definitely go towards it. Now, all the questions that we talked about here are considerations that you're going to think about, and that's going to be part of your homework this week. So this is kind of the framework of how to think about the different niches once you kind of brainstorm and list them down, and that will help you to make a decision about which one you should be focusing on.